Hello and welcome to another moon sign video in my moon sign series. This time we're going to be doing Moon in Gemini. Now, Moon in Gemini is actually, in my opinion, a really difficult placement for the moon to be in, simply because we have mutable air here in a planet that's supposed to deal with our emotional nature, and Gemini is the 12th sign from Cancer. And so, since the 12th house, as we know, is the house of self-undoing and stuff, Moon being that rules Cancer and placed in Gemini can actually be a really, really difficult placement. And here is why. I'm not saying that having Moon in Gemini is bad, obviously. There's no such thing as a bad placement. There are bad aspects that can bring on bad karma and whatnot, but bad sign placements, there's no such thing. And with Moon in Gemini, here the problem is that the emotional nature comes to terms with a sign that's very logical and very changeable. Gemini is mutable air. Gemini is logical. They are multifaceted. They constantly are changing and thinking about multiple different things at once. They can never seem to stop thinking. Their head feels like they're moving at 90,000 miles per hour. They're very intellectual and have a hard time dealing with sort of like emotional things. And so having Gemini placed where your moon sign is, your typical Gemini moon is going to be the very talkative person. They're going to have a very emotional need to talk about things. This could be talking about their feelings and whatnot, talking about pretty much anything. They can be a lot worse at times than Gemini suns because of this sort of emotional need to just talk, and many of times they can be very bad at listening to other people because of this. But usually when it comes to their feelings, even though they like to talk about their feelings, they have a lot of trouble dealing with them concretely. Of course, this also depends on the aspects and where the moon is placed and whatnot, but a Gemini moon on its own specifically is not a sign that's good with dealing with their feelings. Gemini is a very logical sign. Gemini is air. So what tends to happen with Gemini moons is that they tend to overthink their emotions, so much so, and overanalyze them to the point where they don't feel them anymore. And this is because Gemini is foreign to the concept of feeling. Cancer comes after Gemini, so when Gemini deals with the sort of logical side of things and whatnot, they need to come to terms. They don't understand this sort of emotional connection that Cancer has, which is the sign that falls after Gemini. So emotions are foreign to them. They don't understand them, and I think Gemini moon is probably the most likely moon sign to have problems dealing with their emotions. Of course, Moon in Aquarius is also a very detached moon sign, but to me, Moon in Aquarius is more about not wanting to deal with feelings because they're messy and they get in the way of things. To me, Aquarius is very aware of their own feelings, but prefers not to associate with them. Or Gemini just doesn't have a clue. Gemini doesn't understand them. So they tend to ask questions like, why am I feeling like this? What's making me feel like this? They always have an inner need to try to understand the ins and outs of every feeling that they have. But the problem with this is that feelings are illogical. They don't make sense. Feelings are the sort of like inner energy that we're going on inside of us, and the way we feel about things is based on how we react to situations around us. And so because they're so illogical, Gemini has a hard time dealing with them. So, like I said before, they tend to have a problem where they want to sort of intellectualize their feelings to the point where they can't feel them anymore. They tend to numb their own feelings by thinking about them too much. And so Gemini needs to stop thinking about their feelings so much. They need to stop overthinking their feelings and just let them flow, which is something that Gemini has a lot of trouble with. Gemini is curious about everything. Gemini wants to know about everything. Gemini is the sort of sign that's like the jack of all trades. It's figure everything out because everything's fascinating, that sort of thing. And so with Moon in Gemini, that's kind of how they approach their feelings. And this can be bad because they try to like intellectualize and rationalize their feelings to try to make sense of the logical side that they have to them. And so they kind of end up running into a wall because of this, because as you know, feelings are illogical, they don't make sense, so they try to like sort through them. And so this can lead to that sort of thing where they numb their feelings, and in this case, Gemini moon can be very a sign that's very lacks emotional depth and can sometimes be seen as very shallow because they're very logical about them. They're not the most emotional sign out there. And with Moon in Gemini, this can often be reflected in the way that they deal with others, because most of the time our moon sign comes out also in ways that we deal with our emotions reflected in how we deal with other people's emotions. The way we approach how we feel about things can also reflect on how we deal with other people's feelings. It's called projection. And so oftentimes an unevolved Gemini moon can be the kind of person that kind of just like ignores your feelings, doesn't really take into account them, doesn't take your feelings seriously. A Gemini moon might feel like their feelings are not taken seriously, because Gemini moons also are very talkative and sociable and everything, that most people, because they don't really they're not there making a giant emotional mess over everything. Their feelings can be not taken very seriously, but they can also not take other people's feelings seriously because they don't want to deal with their own feelings, and they numb them out by intellectualizing them too much. Gemini is a sign that doesn't know how to deal with feelings, and I've said this before, because of their air element. And for the most part, Gemini moon struggles with this. It's only fueled by the fact that Gemini moon is a very, very constant and restless sign. They have a lot in common with Aries, such as like being impatient, always on the move, and everything. But Gemini is also a very cerebral sign. And so with Moon and Gemini, often I feel like Moon and Gemini people tend to deal with the worst out of any other person who has Gemini in their chart. That Moon and Gemini struggles with the fact that their mind just is constantly racing all the time. Their mind is just it doesn't stop. It keeps going. They just think about everything so much. They can have these moments where they'll just be like sitting around doing absolutely nothing, and their brain will be like going through 900 million things a minute, just going through all these different things at once. And sometimes Gemini kind of feeds back into the sort of shallow side of Gemini, in the sense that they are experiencing so many different things at once that they don't have time to necessarily go into depth with one thing at once. And because of that, they just struggle with retaining all of this information, because their mind is just constantly in this cycle. So when you're approaching your emotions that way, it's not good for one, because like you don't let yourself feel the emotions you have by basically just like letting them flow. You just take your feeling, you're like, oh, I'm sad because of this, and then it just kind of triggers this sort of sequence of events that continues on throughout, and you kind of like make all of these out of abnormal associations with everything that's going on around you, and connect all of the dots trying to figure everything out, and it ends up numbing the feeling out, and you don't let yourself out. What tends to happen is that they think about their feelings so much that they kill their own feelings. When they feel like they're about to cry, they think about everything that's like about to make them cry, and why they make them cry, and everything else connected with that, and everything that has made them cry, and everything about that. And by the time that they fought through all of that, they're not even sad anymore, because they thought too much and their feeling goes away. And obviously this is a bad cycle, because one, they'll numb their emotional nature, then let their emotions have a time to come out. And two, because of this, it's just going to feed back into a cycle where they numb their emotions so much to the point where they just eventually just snap. All of it comes spilling out, because humans are humans. We can only hold in so much for so long. I'd say, if anything, Moon Scorpio is probably the moon sign that can hold the most in, along with Moon in Capricorn. But aside from that, Moon in Gemini is not a sign that can hold this stuff in for very, very long. And of course, this also depends on the fact, like if your 8th house Gemini moon is obviously going to be very, very different, etc. And Gemini needs to let this stuff out. I said before, Moon and Gemini just needs to like let themselves feel things, do not overthink them so much. They tend to be very curious individuals, as I said. Because their mind is all over the place. On a good note for Moon and Gemini, they're very quick-witted. Gemini moons are very quick learners. They will learn things very quickly, and they tend to be very, very adaptable to things. Often, a Gemini moon will often be the person that said, oh, like, people will tell them, oh, you learn things so fast. You just know how to, like, you just pick up on things so easily. And it's because Gemini moon it's because of their, like, mutable air nature. They want to adapt to situations on a cerebral level, and so they kind of, like, make a logical analysis of what is going on before they enact on it, and they take on all the details that they need to and act on it. It's not like Moon in Virgo or something. Moon in Virgo is very organized and particular about it, though. They kind of just take it in, and then they put it to use, and that's what it is. And so Gemini moons on the good side, they can learn things very quickly. They're very intelligent people. They tend to carry on a lot of facts. I knew a Gemini moon person who said something to me that was like the most Gemini moon thing ever. And he said, I know a little bit about everything, but a whole lot about nothing. And that to me is like a statement that summarizes Gemini moon perfectly. There's nothing else that I've heard that makes more sense to Gemini moon than that. I know a little bit about everything, but a whole lot about nothing. That's Gemini moon. That's Moon and Gemini for you. That's a very Moon Gemini thing to say. And it's true because of the fact that Gemini moon is just such a mutable air sign that wants to learn about everything, and this kind of like is rooted deep in their emotional being. Moon and Gemini people can be very, very intelligent. If they pay attention, they are willing to learn about everything. They can also be the kind of people that are known as like being very funny. They always like to crack jokes and be funny and comedic and whatnot. They like to make people laugh. That's just Gemini. Gemini likes to make people laugh, and even though they can be they can sometimes be very emotionally shallow at times. Moon and Gemini is also very capable of bringing that sort of thing. A lot of times but feeding back into the cycle again, Moon and Gemini can also be a sign that tends to dodge like emotional confrontations, because Gemini is an air sign. They don't like dealing with feelings. So oftentimes they'll kind of like crack jokes or try to like say things that deter from emotional conversations. When it comes to emotional things that they did in the past, they tend to like not want to talk about it, and they'll try to like they'll try to deflect it by talking about something else or cracking a joke or being humorous or something, because Gemini is not a sign that's comfortable with feelings. They don't like being comfortable, and oftentimes don't like being comfortable in their feelings, and because they just don't know how to handle them. And oftentimes Gemini moon can also be afraid of being alone. It's not like Aquarius, where Aquarius needs alone time. Gemini moon can often be overwhelmed by their alone time because their mind just keeps going and the thoughts keep getting louder and they keep running and moving forward so much that they kind of like sometimes will just immerse themselves into a noisy environment with a bunch of people around them just to like get away from the fact that there just is so much happening in their head that they don't know how to deal with it. Gemini moon is a sign that's very, very prone to anxiety. People, if you have high anxiety and you have a Gemini moon, that's probably why. Your Gemini moon gives you a lot of info when it comes to anxiety problems. So to recap over Gemini moon, they're very restless. Their mind is constantly growing at 90,000 miles per hour, and they can be easily overrun by their feelings and what's going on in their head. They have trouble sorting through their feelings and come across as emotionally shallow because they don't want to deal with them and might use divertive tactics like deflection and cracking jokes and whatnot to not deal with them. And at times, Moon and Gemini can also be the sign that overthinks their feelings to the point where they numb their own emotions out. They don't give their emotions a chance to breathe. And so my advice to Gemini moon is, as I said before, just let your emotions flow. Don't think about them so much. When you feel them, just let them feel. Let yourself get it out of you and just move on with your life. Let your emotions flow naturally. That's what your emotions are supposed to do. Learn from just go around and hang around a bunch of Cancer moons, even though you might think that they're just full of fucking emotional drama. Cancer moons tend to have a better grip on dealing with their feelings than most people do, at least I hope. Find emotionally mature Cancer moon and learn how to deal with your emotions there. Don't overthink your feelings, just let them go. Let yourself flow, let them flow, let them get out of you and move on with your life. And that's what I have for Gemini moon. If you're Gemini moon and you enjoyed this, please like this video. You can subscribe to my channel if you want. Go watch my other moon sign videos that I have up, and I'll talk to you later. So thanks for watching.